Welcome back inside the Stingray Show. Hope all is well with you guys here on Tide 100.9. And we are about to get to our special guest this evening, who is the host of a national radio show on Fox Sports. He is the host of the show, The Doug Gottlieb Show. Ladies and gentlemen, to help us talk about the upcoming season of college basketball as we move into conference play and to preview the national championship game, here is Mr. Doug Gottlieb. Doug, Happy New Year, and how are things out there in California?
Well, post Rose Bowl, a little chilly. We actually, you know how beautiful the Rose Bowl is, especially with that
Yes.
sunset shot. But what people don't know is one night later we had rain. It was just foreign substance fall from the sky, but we've somehow recovered
Yes.
and we're persevering and we're throwing on our puffer jackets and our beanies and our gloves because it's down in the 40s at night. So I like again like this. There's a lot of solidarity here. We're gonna make it and we're gonna overcome.
Yes.
Doug, I lived in Southern California briefly in San Diego, and a lot of people here just couldn't understand it. It doesn't rain much out there. And so rain's just kind of like, if we're here, we get it once a week, but there it's not normal.
No, it's a very. I grew up in Southern California, and there's years where it doesn't rain. I first moved
Yeah.
back. Well, I was at ESPN. I switched to CBS. I moved back here in 2012. From 2012 to 2014, I tracked it. It did not rain once during daylight hours. So I never I woke up a couple times with sprinkles on my car, but never had the rain. And then the last year specifically, we had it'd been severe drought, and then it just rained for. We've had two of these since I moved back in 2017. Two of these winters where just a constant for like a month of rain. And Heath, what you're talking about is it's like we don't know what to do with ourselves. Like people don't know how to drive, they don't know how to be, they don't know what to wear. They're like, wait, am I supposed to? Can I go outside when this stuff happens? What do I do? So it's a different. People say we don't have seasons. We do. We have the good one. That's what we.
Hey,
But yeah,
so Doug, you just mentioned it right there, the Rose
yeah.
Bowl game. Would you please break down and recap that game as you saw it between Alabama and Michigan?
I mean, I would say that Michigan felt very tight to me. It's the only. I mean, with all the blunders and errors, it wasn't a particularly well played game from either side. It wasn't a clean game, and it allowed Alabama to stay close. I do think, and it's like we're sitting here and people can do a victory lap for Michigan. It's like, hey, weren't you down 20-13? You had to, have a game tying drive to end up forcing overtime. I
Yes.
do think Michigan was the better overall team this year. I think that actually speaks to the job that Coach Saban did with his roster. Like if I know you guys watch, you saw that Texas game. You're like, well, Texas has better players. You
Yeah.
know, so I think there's some of it is just a given year that happens. Some of it is, it's you're in a cycle now where Alabama in previous incarnations had an NFL quarterback and some really good ones, and now you get one who's more of a college quarterback, and there's some limitations to what you can do. But still, to get to the national semifinals, to beat Georgia, and to do so with on many levels a limited passing game, I think that's still a big time program victory, even though you didn't win. For Michigan, like you just got to find a way to win a game
Yeah.
Right.
and getting over that hump when you haven't been there before, and then or you've been there, you haven't won before. Last year too many turnovers. This year nearly too many turnovers. So I thought it was. I thought it was a close game, but not a well played game.
Right.
And the better, more talented team won.
So
Looking into next year when we have the college football playoff, a team like Alabama will benefit for it. Milrow's gotten better every game and got better throughout the season. In the playoff, he's going to get an extra game or two to get better heading into the national championship game. We had Mr. College Football on, Tony Barnhart. He's a friend of the show. We have him on all the time. Doug, what do you think about all these people who are hating on the college football playoff And Tony said this, guys, what are you going to do? Sit around and watch reruns of Law and Order? I mean, this is free entertainment. This is what we want. And it also gets the players better, and it's going to make better football. Your thoughts on the playoff next year?
I mean, like, obviously it's going to save whatever remnants of postseason football that we have. I mean, that's just kind of the reality to it is, I mean, the rest of the bowl season's been awful with the transfer kids putting them in the transfer portal and other guys protecting their NFL stock, whatever they're doing. And look, I had a friend once, a guy named Sarin Petro, who does he does radio in Kansas City, really talented afternoon host, #1 show in Kansas City. Sarin said one time to me, he's like, "Hey, if the bowl season was so great, how come no one copies it?"
Right.
Yeah.
But it is unique and is special. And the fact is that it's killing. Bowls are dead. There's no more, from our days back in the Blue Bonnet Bowl or the Holiday Bowl. Like there's not even now when you go and play in a bowl, it's not the same because you don't have the chance, one, to travel around, go to the amusement parks, do the dinners. It's not really a celebration of a season the way it used to be. But now we have a true playoff. That means that 12 teams, you'll have all those players thoroughly engaged, and there'll be very little portal talk. So it's going to be different. It's going to be a whole new world. My guess would be that now it's if you don't make the playoff at some of these high level schools, you're going to see more heads roll. It's a lot like when the NCAA tournament expands. Coaches thought, hey, when you expand more teams in, that means more coaches are safe. But the truth is that it kind of devalues getting into the tournament. And then if you don't get into the tournament, like, man, you got all these spots and you still didn't get in, you're fired. So we do become kind of an all or nothing sort of society. I'm excited to see. I mean, like, we're old enough, and you don't have to be that old to remember when we had 2 national champions.
Yeah.
Like, you're right. I mean, and I think, I don't know if I talked about it on your guys' show, but it's like Florida State complaining about not getting into the college football playoff. Well, okay, there's some validity to your complaints, but there's been times previously where Florida State has benefited where their record looked the same as somebody else, and they got to play in a bowl game or in a national championship when others did not. So there is a certain amount of fairness. It's no longer the only sport without a playoff. And I do think there's a lot of good that comes from it. There's going to be bad, right? Like, devalues the regular season. It's impossible. It's impossible not to. That's why I always thought 8 was the right number. I just thought eight would be, you had to win your conference, then you got 3 at-larges, because I mean, 12 is going to be hard. And then the other thing we can take from this year's bowl season, like, we have to stop with the heartstrings over like Liberty. And how many times have we seen that slightly lower level, Cincinnati, Hawaii, like, you name it. Now, look, there's been exceptions. Utah, obviously, back when they were in the Mountain West, beat Bama.
And Doug, last year we had Tulane beat USC.
Yeah, but again, like that's the portal era,
right?
Yeah. It's the portal. You can't, like, bowl records mean nothing now. Yes. 0 if it's a non national championship level bowl.
Yes.
Doug, I'm a Mississippi State grad, so I'm going to drop Mike Leach here. Mike Leach made the joke, and he was being somewhat serious. He's like, we should have a 64-team playoff, and don't tell me we can't do it. The guy at your local Parks and Rec office that does the softball tournaments can make the bracket. You know what? That sounds far-fetched, but if we actually did, I mean, we already got, I can't remember how many teams are playing in bowl games anyway, but heaven forbid if we did have a 64-team playoff, we would stop this opting out, and I think it would cut back on the transfer portal a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, like, here's the other part to it, though, that I don't know if people have thought about. Like, the kids can't play that many games. The bodies don't hold up. You don't have enough players. Right. You're going to get too beat up. And I'm not talking about for your NFL livelihood and any of that stuff. I'm just talking about the reality is it's a violent game.
It is.
And we'll be very fortunate to have 12 teams with their 12 starting quarterbacks. right? And
Right.
if you don't think that affects your team, I give you Florida State, right? So yes, it would stop, I think, the opt-outs. But the thing is, like, the second these teams lose, the kids are gonna put themselves in the portal anyway. So I think that can be, there's remedies for that. I mean, like, look, you have to find a way in which you create an like I hope people understand that what our fellow members of the media is saying is not true, in that they believe that it's all about schools protecting themselves. There is some of that, don't get me wrong, but like, um, I'll give you an example. A kid named Trace Ford. Okay? Trace Ford played at Oklahoma State for 4 years as a team captain. Last offseason, he transferred to Oklahoma. And he was banged up from a long career. He was okay. He's fine. He didn't have a great year. He had a great year at Oklahoma State the year before. Didn't have a great year. So he's not an Oklahoma State guy anymore. He's not really an Oklahoma guy, you know?
Right.
And there's nothing wrong with him as a human being. Like, he's not like a bad kid in any way.
Right.
But and now with the ruling where, two-time transfers are back to being able to play, like, you're going to have kids playing 3-4 schools. And so what that does is, sure, fine, they can go and get another paycheck every year, on some level. Right? But then when you get done playing, like, how do you get a job? Like,
Right.
I'm just, like, the way it really works in the real world is you get done playing, especially in football, because there's no overseas. I know
Right.
I know you have the minor leagues, which combined, I think, going back to yesterday, right? The XFL and the USFL, right, combined. But I mean, that's not a long-term plan. So what do? Right? Well, you talk to your boys, and somebody who you went to your school is like, hey, man, like, you want to come down and sell pharmaceuticals, like, I'll take care of you, I'll get you in the door. Or you want to do a show, or you want to, whatever you want to do. It's all the connections with your university because you played for that university. Well, that stuff goes away. Additionally, we create this, like, mentality for kids that you can bounce job to job to job, 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 job. And, like, nope, like, that's not how it works. It
Right.
really isn't. So I don't think we're setting them up for long-term success, even though short-term they're all doing much better. And there has to be some balance in the middle. But in terms of the actual sport, this was an awful bowl season because you didn't know who was playing for any of these teams.
Mm-hmm.
You just don't, like, and I feel bad for Florida State, right? Like, that's not representative of their school, but because they have the opt-outs, because they have kids in the portal, like, they go out there and they play Georgia. Now, obviously, Georgia, I'm guessing their NIL deals are probably written pretty smartly, where you got to play that last game.
Yeah.
We also have to deconstruct this narrative that, well, it's the postseason, it's not your season. Like, really? Like, the players. Here's the way. And Heath, I don't know if you played football growing up or whatever, okay. So you can speak on this, which is, like, look, what you go through in August, okay, frankly in June and July, but what you go through in August, right, when it's hot as hell and you're doing 2-a-days and you're grinding together, like, the reward is that last bowl game, that playoff game. But more than anything, like, those are your brothers, and for 95% of these guys, it's the last time they're ever going to put on helmet and shoulder pads.
Right.
Like, literally the last time you're ever going to put it on. Okay. And it's not like, football is very, very unique. Like, in basketball, like, you may not play professionally, but you're going to play basketball at some point in your life. In football,
Right.
you ain't ever put on,
No, you're
shells.
not.
You're just not. And so you're saying that, like, you're not going to go play football, forget about it, for you, for those other guys that made it possible for you to be you. Like, that's what we're teaching guys, like, that level of selfishness. And you're in a sport that is the most selfless sport. Nothing works without everybody making it work correctly. Like, everything, it's a symphony with 11 guys. And it bothers me. So I do agree that this bowl season has been kind of an abject disaster, and it shines a bright light on the issues in college athletics.
Right.
That said, that was a spectacular New Year's Day, right? We had two great games. I should point out, we used to have like 6 awesome games. Now we
Yeah.
have 2. And it's going to give us a very unique national championship. And the best part about it, though, is that I think it shows there's more than one way to be successful. And probably the best way to be successful, first, you got to have a quarterback. And then I really think you got to have a high retention rate. You know, that the new way in which I think the portal will become less and less attractive for most of these schools, because if you have a certain amount of money, you're better off re-recruiting the kids you have. And even if they frustrate you, they drive you crazy, whatever, and you drive them crazy, you have a greater likelihood of success
Right.
if you have cohesiveness from previous years. That wins. So I do think there is some good from it.
So, Doug, on that note, we got to take our final break. And when we come back, we are going to dive into college basketball. That's on the other side of the break. You're listening to the Stingray Show. We will be right back. Doug, do you have. Okay.
You guys can go ahead. I'll pop on one second. I'm just texting. So.
Okay. Welcome back inside of our final segment right here on the Stingray Show. Our guest this evening is none other than Doug Gottlieb. And Doug, I've got to ask you my final question about college football before we move to college basketball. You were in the heart of LA. Now that the Pac-12 season is over, what is the vibe from USC and UCLA fans about making the transition to the Big Ten?
It's interesting. So I live in Orange County.
Okay.
So Orange County is a county directly south of Los Angeles County. It's in between LA and San Diego.
Gotcha.
It is Orange County is USC headquarters. You know, one of my close buddies who lives around the corner is the guy who really runs the collective for USC. And I think there's a couple things. One, most people in the West Coast have zero idea what they're getting into.
Right.
They don't know. They don't understand the level of and I understand, like, the SEC would blow their mind, but the Big Ten is a massive step in terms of the overall investment from a university into an athletic program.
Yeah.
Now, look, SC, they bought the Coliseum, they redid the Coliseum. They're still USC. They got a bunch of Heismans, they got a bunch of national championships. They're all in, and all in financially, but I don't think they understand what they're getting into in terms of, like, they'll look down at, for example, the Big Ten West schools, right? But they haven't ever been to Iowa and understand how, like, all in that thing is.
Yeah.
UCLA, this is strictly a money-making proposition.
Right.
And the UCLA, by my estimation, will be a lot like the Chargers have been for probably the first. Chargers have a following now, but for the first 5 years when they moved up the coast. By that I mean, Rose Bowl is it takes about an hour to get to the Rose Bowl from UCLA's campus. You know, it's not that far, but it's you can't go on a direct shot, right? Like,
Right.
So
you can't walk from the door.
Correct. So, and remember, like, you're in LA, like when they play, I forget who they play next year. Like, you play Wisconsin, there's going to be 30,000 Wisconsin fans there, you know?
Yeah.
And we play Iowa, same thing. Cause you know, especially, and it's as bad as it's going to be when they play the Michigans and the Penn States of the world. It's going to be equally difficult when you play Minnesota or when you play Purdue, because, well, those fans haven't been to a Rose Bowl in however many, 30, 40 years, whatever. So This is their chance to go see the Rose Bowl. So UCLA, it was purely fun. And to a certain extent, USC, right? USC had another one of those issues on campus with the doctor where they had to write a bunch of checks, and their motivations are financial. Well, what that does is, though, for your athletic department is, like, first you have the travel, and people say, well, they'll never get back to campus with the classes. most of these kids take all online classes anyway. But the travel is really, really hard to compete in. I think the level of investment, especially at UCLA, I think they're going to be blown away by like how can we possibly compete. And like UCLA, I mean, you look at their. I know we're going to get to basketball in a second, but the reason their basketball program is down, one, they're really young, but two, they're not able to compete in the portal because they just don't have the money. And look, the Big Ten is a softer landing spot than the SEC or the Big 12, but the top level programs are going to be all in.
Yeah.
And I don't think, especially UCLA, their alums, their donors have any idea what they're in for in terms of all of their sports. Now, are they helped by Oregon and Washington's going to be a really interesting one because they're not getting the full TV revenue. And the way it really works within a university is you don't need the TV revenue for the NIL, but you can't call the same person. You can't say, hey, baseball's got a shortfall. Like, hey man, we need $300,000 for an extra coach, a pitching machine, something, whatever. Well, you call somebody and you call a donor and they take care of it. Well, now you're calling that same donor.
Right.
Every sport's calling them.
It's not sustainable.
Right? No, because at some point they're like, wait, you want me to donate to all the? I'm not made of money.
Right.
So I do wonder about. I mean, Oregon. Everybody just thinks Phil Knight's going to fund the whole thing, and I think for a short period of time he will. But like again, at some point you can't fund everything.
Right.
So I don't know. It's a really curious time, and we'll see how it ends up. Working out. Obviously, the Florida State thing could throw this thing up in the air yet again. But I don't think people are psyched. They're not. I mean, they'll be. Will you be fired up when you're USC and instead of playing Washington State, you're playing Michigan, Penn State, and Ohio State? Sure, absolutely. But it's like people have forgotten. Like, hey, the Big Ten does include Rutgers. Big Ten does include Minnesota. The Big Ten does include Purdue. The Big Ten doesn't, so there are some programs that are just as weak in terms of name recognition as the Oregon States of the world, the Arizona States of the world. So I think it's a really curious time, but I think my big, if I had to guess, SC folks are much more worried about just fixing their program, and UCLA folks, they're going to love the fact that their stadium and their arena is full, but I don't think they have any idea what they're in for in terms of overall level of investment in an athletic department in comparison to what they do.
Doug, you kind of mentioned something there, and you were talking about basketball, and it made me think about Bobby Knight as we head into this season. We lost Bobby Knight here, a couple of months ago, and I personally love the General. I would have loved to play for him. I always liked coaches that used to tell me that I couldn't do it. So I would, go out there and show them that I could. Bobby Knight is no longer with us. Do you have a great story about the General?
Yeah, I mean, actually, my dad was his teammate at Ohio State. My dad was a walk-on those great Ohio State teams. I didn't play on the varsity, played in the JV, but he got to be around. And then my dad became a high school coach and a college coach. And so the first thing is his jump shot. He shot a weird kind of over his head, almost, they call it the blue dart. That was his shot. So he was the sixth man on a couple of great Ohio State teams with Jerry Lucas and John Havlicek.
Oh yeah.
And he shot the blue dart. And he is one of the most charming men you've ever met if he decided to be charming. And he could be one of the biggest a-holes on earth when he decided to be an a-hole.
Right.
But he was absolutely brilliant. So my favorite story is this. So I'm close with a bunch of those IU guys. Mike Lewis, who's the head coach of Ball State, he was his last point guard in Indiana. And then he worked for him at Texas Tech. Brian Evans. Brian Evans told me the story once where Pat Knight played obviously for his dad.
Right.
And Coach Knight had a rule you couldn't curse at practice. Now, Now, listen. In fairness, we had that rule at Oklahoma State. Only Coach Sutton never cursed, so it wasn't the hey, do as I do, not as I say.
Mhm.
But he had and Pat was a mumbler and would curse under his breath a bunch. So I think a couple things happened in succession. One, Pat had gotten a tattoo that his dad didn't know he had, and he walked into the locker room and saw he had a tattoo. It was like on like his leg or his thigh or something like that, and he lost his mind. Anyway, so the next day at practice, Pat, came off a screen and caught the ball and missed a shot and said the C word.
Mm-mm.
So so they go to shoot free throws, and he said, "Pat, you got a dirty effing mouth, right?" Which is, I want you to run those steps, every step, and you're going to say that word on every step. Now, there were also a group of nuns at practice
Oh no.
that were watching. And so if you've ever been to Assembly Hall where Indiana plays, like it is steep on the sides. So just a little bit of stands in the end zones and then steep in the sides. So Brian Evans told me like he heard like the word
Mhm.
right as he's going up the steps and down the steps.
Oh, that's great.
We needed that's you actually Heath, you brought to mind. We need to do a like a Netflix special and just have all those old time Indiana guys just tell stories.
You tell me when and
Because-
where, dog, and I'll be there.
Oh, so good, so good. And look, let's before we just make fun of his foul mouth and everybody knows his temper. My favorite part of Coach Knight and Chris Beard at Ole Miss. This is he uses this as one of the mantras for his program is the 4 is the 1. And his Coach Knight's belief was that basketball is like the mental aspect of it is 4 times as important as the physical aspect of it. And I think honestly, that's a great life lesson, right?
It is.
That mentality is 4 times as important as what you actually do or what you're actually capable of.
You were talking earlier in the show about, you kept naming Purdue and things. And every time I hear Purdue, I think of the Bobby Knight rant. I'm sick and tired of losing Purdue. And I love the line in that rant. He goes, I'll run you so hard. If I'll run you so hard, you'll think last night was a picnic. And I was like, I wonder what happened last night.
There's one story that I've been told that they played at Iowa, and Coach Knight on the Indiana's team playing, he had like a chair in front of all the players, and they lost at Iowa, and he's looking at the stat sheet, getting madder, and he had a bowl of fruit next to him, and he turns around, he starts reading off the stat sheet and throwing fruit at Craig Graham, 5 turnovers, what the? And he starts throwing. But the worst part is that the managers were reloading him. They're like diving over and getting all this fruit. And like, we got to go get Coach Knight his fruit back. So he's a little bit of, I don't know if, why am I blanking? What's the writer? He's a Boston guy, has the ring. He runs the Ringer. Why am I forgetting?
Oh, not Hennessy. Westash. I see him. Doesn't even.
He used to do ESPN NBA stuff. God, why am I forgetting? Anyway, he invented the Tyson zone. And the Tyson zone is there's no story about Mike Tyson that you wouldn't believe to be true. Right?
Yeah.
That's the Tyson zone. Bob Knight is in the Tyson zone. Like there's no story that you don't believe to be true.
I agree with that.
So, Doug, briefly, before we let you go, I have 2 questions left for you. The first one is going ahead and give us a couple of teams in college basketball that you think could make some deep runs this year, and give us your final 4 teams in the tournament.
Man, you just hit me with all the hard stuff. Well, first, like here's the thing. It's so hard to figure out what's what, who's who, because one, everybody had a new team for the most part. I mean, Purdue a little different, but they added a kid. Secondly, you had like a wave of players who got eligible like 2 weeks ago. So people are changing, teams are changing. I would say that Ole Miss, who we previously mentioned, Oklahoma, BYU, those are a couple of the surprise teams in college basketball.
Yep.
And they've gone out, done a good job in the portal. They've scheduled all three of them is scheduled pretty light as well. So it's tough to truly tell, but those are like the surprise, like I didn't think they were going to be that good, and they're pretty good.
Right.
Illinois is a team I like a great deal, but Terrence Shannon, their best player, just got suspended indefinitely for a charge in Kansas, which is now they look great without him, one game, but I think eventually they're not going to be as good a team when you lose a 23-year-old superstar. I mean, he was playing like an All-American, averaging over 20 a game. So, if I had to pick right now, I still like Duke. They've gone through some lineup changes because of injuries. They won last night despite some foul trouble to Kyle Filipowski, who's their best player, is returning sophomore big guy. They have a freshman backcourt now as they're bringing their sophomore point guard off the bench after he got hurt. But I still like Duke. I think if you look at the Big East, obviously UConn, again, right now they don't have Donovan Clingan, who's their starting center. And they lost a game at Seton Hall, who might be a little bit better than we thought. But
Right.
I think this could be a year in which Marquette makes a Final Four run.
Okay.
They're built very differently than UConn is, much more perimeter oriented. They have Tyler Kolek, who's a fifth-year senior point guard. It's tremendous. So I think if I had to pick one team there, I love the way Kentucky's playing. I just
Yeah.
do.
Okay.
He's letting those young guards go, and he's playing whoever's playing the best on that night. I don't know if they have too much youth for when they get into February, into March. We'll see here with the SEC. But when I look at the SEC, I do think that Kentucky, while they may not win the league, I think they have the best chance of making a run in the NCAA tournament because you got 3 or 4 guards that can go get you 20, and most teams don't have that.
No, they
And
don't.
then I think when you look, and then of course you got the Big 12, which is the best league, and Kansas and Houston appear to be the class of the league. I think Baylor's in that discussion; they can really score. And then I'm trying to figure out exactly what Texas is. Good, a lot of good pieces, but struggling to kind of make it feel like they're a Final Four team. I would guess that either KU or Houston are a Final Four caliber team, and then. The last thing is keep an eye on the Mountain West. Last year, San Diego State broke through, got to a Final Four. The rest of the league is really, really, really good.
Yes.
Nevada's played a light schedule, but they've beaten the brakes off most teams. Utah State, same thing. But go in and look at Colorado State. Isaiah Stevens I think he scored his 2,000th point last night.
Yep.
They're really good. San Diego State's still very good. You got that league's probably going to get 5 teams in the NCAA tournament.
Wow.
And it wouldn't stun me. San Diego State's not as good as they were last year. They're not as deep defensively. They may be a little bit better offensively. Wouldn't stun me at all if a Colorado State was the team that made a deep run this year instead of San Diego State.
Okay.
So,
You know,
Doug, my final question for you is simply this: going to college football, Monday evening, national championship game, Michigan, Washington, in Houston. Break that game down for us, and who do you have winning the national championship?
Well, I think Michael Penix is the best player in the field.
okay.
And I think Kalen DeBoer is an incredible coach. And I've talked to NFL scouts who are like, look, they got 3 pro wide receivers, they got pros up front. But how many times have we got in this game like, who's got the best overall defense, right? Who can win at the line of scrimmage? And Michigan has loaded up. They have, I don't want to see like SEC level talent, but they're like a Georgia from really 2 years ago, a little bit last year,
Yeah.
where they just got dudes,
They do.
all over. They just got dudes.
Right.
And I think Michigan wins. I think,
I'm with
and look, I love Penix, but yet people going, well,
Yeah.
he should have won the Heisman. Like, no, he went through a month where he wasn't playing well.
Mhm.
And so I think he's a tremendous talent. They're good, but I'm going to always take the team that I think wins more at the line of scrimmage, and has the better overall defense. I think they tried to rub it in, like they almost gave away that game there against Texas, trying to score instead of just trying to get out of there with a win. And I think that one of the reasons that Michigan hasn't blown a lot of people out here late in the season is because they just want to win games and get out the field and get on to the next one.
Yeah.
And I think they're just as capable of pummeling teams. They just were very, very smart about, let's not put ourselves in a position where we can lose any of these games. Like they played Penn State. Could they have gone and tried to beat Penn State by half 100? Of course they could have. But instead, they didn't throw the ball in the second half. Why? Let's just win the game and get home. So I think the Michigan team is loaded. I think they win the game.
Doug, my last question is Jim Harbaugh thumbing his nose at the NCAA and the rest of America. This will be his last college game, and he'll run off to the NFL after the season.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I don't know. Well, look, we try and follow the breadcrumbs, right? Why would he hire Don Yee? Yeah. Unless he like, you're already negotiating with Michigan. You don't need an agent for that. So,
no, you don't.
Now if it's me, I'm like, dude, stay where you're going to have better players than 95% of the teams that you play. You don't have that in the NFL. Now, here's the thing that I think could push him to the NFL is we all love our schools, right? Like you're a Mississippi State, you love your school.
Right.
And he loves Michigan.
He does.
Played there. His dad coached there for a bit. But it's so transactional now in college athletics that there's a lot less connection with the university. And that's hard to take. I think he goes to the NFL. I don't think that's the main reason or the only reason. I think he got to the Super Bowl and lost. He wants to win a Super Bowl.
Right.
I think, if you like to coach football, you don't deal with all the other stuff.
Yeah.
In the NFL, you just coach football. Mm-hmm. But I also think that there is a certain percentage of it, which is like, hey, I actually, care about this place, and we're teaching kids to care less and less about the place and the people at the place instead about the paycheck. And so I do think that you factor in the Don Yee thing, and you're like, he's probably going. So yeah, I don't know if it's a thumb the nose to the NCAA. I don't think it's really like the NCAA stuff is part of it. It's tiresome, but I think it's more I love this place, and I used to love when guy comes in as a freshman, redshirts, gets a little time as a freshman, sophomore he starts to earn a starting spot. Junior year he's an all-league guy. Senior year he's an All-American. Like he graduates, he has kids, he marries a Michigan woman. They come back. This is their alma. Like those days are over. Gone. They're over, and that's really, really hard when you love the place that you played and that you coach at.
Mm-hmm.
So, Doug, look, man, thank you so much for joining us. And if you would please let everybody know right here on Tide 100.9 where they can listen to the Doug Gottlieb Show, please.
Fox Sports Radio, foxsportsradio.com. You can download the show in the iHeartRadio app. You can download our in podcast form. I also want one other little plug here. I have a podcast called All Ball. And it's a basketball podcast, but it's really a storytelling podcast. And my guest over the next 3 pods is a guy named Josh Lucas. Josh was most recently the director of player personnel for the Chicago Bears. He was a student athlete at Harvard. And you'll hear his tale of going from being a student athlete at Harvard, had to lead the football team because of repeated injuries, kind of started as a grinder, picked people up from the airport with the Jacksonville Jaguars, and went from Jacksonville to New Orleans working with Sean Payton and that staff, and then he was with the Chicago Bears until they got fired a couple years ago. There's a personal side of his battle against prescription pain medication, all kinds of different stuff. It's called All Ball with Doug Gottlieb. You just type in Doug Gottlieb, you'll find it, and I think people get a lot out of it hearing somebody else's story.
When you want to do the Netflix with Bobby Knight, let me know. I'm in.
Okay, let's do it, Heath.
So, Doug, thank you again. Enjoy the college basketball season. Happy New Year, and we will catch up later on closer to the tournaments being revealed.
Thanks, Stingray.
Thank you.
See you, Doug.
See you guys.
All right, Heath. Well, that's going to do it for this edition of the Stingray Show. We hope that you guys have thoroughly enjoyed it. Have a wonderful weekend here in Tuscaloosa, as it is going to be a wet and windy one. And Heath, let's go on ahead and do it together, my friend.
We
We
are
are
out.
out. See you guys right back here on Monday evening talking a little Alabama basketball versus South Carolina.